You'll never wed the prince. You'll wed the king.
The beginning of Season 5, Episode 1, before most of those seasons had even been filmed. A 10-year-old girl walked into a witch's hut in the woods outside Casterly Rock, demanded to know her future, and received a prophecy so precise that George R.R. Martin himself asked the question, publicly, when the episode aired. Could Cersei make it happen through her efforts to avoid it? When I went back and traced every line of the prophecy against every relevant event across 8 seasons, the answer I found was more disturbing than the prophecy itself. Maggy the Frog did not just predict the downfall of House Lannister, she predicted the mechanism of it, and the mechanism was Cersei herself. The first prophecy, "You will wed the king." The scene opens with Cersei and her companion Melora Heatherspoon being warned by Maggy that she will not like the answers to her questions. Cersei ignores this. Her first question is the one that defines her entire self-concept at age 10. She has been promised to Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, the heir to the Iron Throne, the most famous and admired prince in Westeros. When will they marry? Maggy's response is immediate and specific. You will never wed the prince. You will wed the king. When I trace this prophecy against what actually happened, the precision of it is startling. Cersei did not marry Rhaegar. She married Robert Baratheon, who became king through Robert's rebellion. Rhaegar died at the Battle of the Trident before he ever sat the throne. The prophecy did not say she would marry a different king. It said specifically that she would not marry the prince. This is the distinction that the child Cersei missed entirely in her initial reaction to the answer. She heard, Agonii at sea. You will wed the king, as a promotion, a step up from prince to king. She did not hear it as a prediction of Rhaegar's death and everything that death would bring with it, the destruction of the Targaryen dynasty, the ascension of a man she did not love, and the political landscape of a kingdom whose power structure would be organized entirely around the strength of whoever wore the crown, rather than the person closest to the crown. The ringer piece on the prophecy noted that Cersei was promised to Rhaegar as a young girl, and had spent years expecting this marriage, expecting to be princess and then queen by the most direct and glamorous possible route. The actual route she got was the wife of a man who loved someone else, produced heirs from incest with her twin brother, and spent her entire reign managing a husband who resented the throne and a court that resented her. You will wed the king sounded like power. What it actually described was the specific form of her captivity. Maggy was right in both the letter and the spirit. Cersei married a king. The marriage was a prison. The second prophecy, for a time. The second exchange is the one that drew the most immediate reaction from young Cersei. The question about whether she would be queen. And Maggy's answer is the most carefully constructed piece of dialogue in the scene, because it delivers the things Cersei wants to hear before burying it under the things she does not want to hear at all. Maggy, oh yes, you'll be queen for a time. Then comes another, younger, more beautiful, to cast you down and take all you hold dear. The structure of this answer is everything. It opens with an enthusiastic affirmation. Oh yes, that confirms Cersei's ambition. Then it inserts a time limit. Then it describes the mechanism of the end. Cersei heard the confirmation and absorbed the qualification incompletely, the way most people hear warnings that are attached to good news. She would be queen. She would hold what she always believed was rightfully hers. And then, somewhere in the unspecified future, something would go wrong. The specific threat, younger, more beautiful, was designed to target the specific insecurity of a girl who had spent her childhood being told that her value was in her beauty and her marriageability. Maggy was not generically warning her of a rival. She was naming the precise psychological lever that Cersei would spend her entire life unable to ignore. When I traced the younger and more beautiful prophecy across the show, I found that Cersei applied it to at least 3 different women and may have been right about all of them in different ways. Sansa Stark was the first, the girl she extracted from Ned Stark's party to be Joffrey's betrothed, who Cersei managed with a combination of coldness and occasional sympathy, never quite comfortable with her presence. Margaery Tyrell was the most active candidate, the specific younger queen whose relationship with both Joffrey and Tommen mirrored exactly what Maggy had predicted, a woman who took what Cersei held dear by being younger, more beautiful, and considerably better at managing the kings who held the throne. And Daenerys Targaryen completed the pattern, a woman with dragons and legitimate claim who had been Cersei's shadow opponent since Season 1 and who finally arrived in Westeros in Season 7 with the army, the allies, and the fire to fulfill every part of the casting down prediction. The ringer piece on the prophecy made the observation that George R.R. Martin himself provided the most clarifying analysis of how this part of the prophecy operated. When Season 5 aired, Martin said, Maggy the Frog tells Cersei a prophecy, but could Cersei make it happen through her efforts to avoid it? The answer is yes, and the mechanism is visible in the specific actions Cersei took to prevent the younger queen from rising. Her persecution of Margaery through the Faith Militant, the very tool she created specifically to neutralize Margaery, directly led to the wildfire plot that killed Margaery. And Tommen, witnessing his wife's death, threw himself from a window. One of the golden shrouds was the direct product of Cersei's attempt to prevent the prophecy. Maggy told her a younger queen would take all she held dear. Cersei destroyed the younger queen, and lost what she held dear anyway, by her own hand. The third prophecy, gold will be their crowns, gold their shrouds. The third and most devastating prediction is delivered in response to Cersei's question about children. She asked whether she and the king would have children together. Maggy's answer was unambiguous. No, the king will have 20 children, and you will have 3. Gold will be their crowns, gold their shrouds. The official transcript from the episode confirms this phrasing exactly. Young Cersei immediately pushes back. That doesn't make sense, because it does not on its face resolve into a logical whole. If the king will have 20 children but not with her, whose are they? If her 3 are not the king's, whose are they? The prophecy did not explain itself. It simply stated the outcome. When I trace the king will have 20 children part against the actual events of the show, the precision is almost uncomfortable. Robert Baratheon had an unknown but large number of bastard children. The show specifically identified several of them, including Gendry, and the Time magazine analysis of the prophecy confirmed that the 20 children referred to Robert's many illegitimate offspring, while the Queen's 3 were products of her incestuous relationship with Jaime. The Ringer noted that the book's version says 16 rather than 20, but the structural meaning is identical. The king's fertility was deployed everywhere except toward his queen. Cersei's 3 children, Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen, were not his biological children at all. The prophecy had encoded this distinction without stating it. The king will have children, and you will have 3. 2 separate sets, 2 separate sources, 1 prophecy. The gold crowns and gold shrouds line is the emotional climax of the prophecy. Gold will be their crowns, gold their shrouds, meaning all 3 of Cersei's children would achieve royal status, and all 3 would die prematurely. When I track the deaths across the series, the accuracy is exact. Joffrey Baratheon was crowned king of the 7 kingdoms and poisoned at his own wedding feast in Season 4. Myrcella Baratheon was Princess of Dorne by marriage alliance and poisoned by Ellaria Sand in the final moments of Season 5. Tommen Baratheon was crowned king after Joffrey's death and threw himself from a window in Season 6 after watching the Great Sept of Baelor destroyed with his wife inside it. 3 crowns, 3 shrouds, each death distinct in its mechanics, and each death fulfilling the prophecy with the specificity of something that had been written before the First War began. What I find most haunting about the Gold Shroud's prediction when I analyze it closely is how each death was, in a meaningful sense, traceable to Cersei's own decisions. Joffrey was killed as a consequence of a conspiracy organized partly in response to his cruelty that Cersei had enabled and occasionally encouraged throughout his childhood. Myrcella was killed as Dorne's revenge for Oberyn Martell's death in the trial by combat that Tyrion's arrest had triggered, an arrest that Cersei had demanded, the trial that Cersei had organized. And Tommen threw himself from a window because his wife had just been incinerated by wildfire that Cersei herself had positioned under the sept. 3 deaths. 3 threads that led back, when traced with sufficient patience, to decisions Cersei had made in her attempts to hold power. Maggan did not tell her that someone would kill her children. She told her that gold would be their shrouds. The prophecy did not identify the murderer identified herself. The Valonqar, what the show left out and why it matters. Here is the detail that the Game of Thrones television adaptation deliberately omitted from the Maggy the Frog scene, and which the show's omission generated more fan debate and critical discussion than perhaps any other editorial decision across 8 seasons. In George R.R. Martin's 4th novel, A Feast for Crows, Maggy delivers a 4th prediction. And when your tears have drowned you, the Valonqar shall wrap his hands about your pale white throat and choke the life from you. Valonqar is High Valyrian for little brother. The SF Bluestocking recap of the episode described the omission as a missed opportunity and noted that the Valonqar line was privately a major part of several reader theories about the future of the series. It was. Cersei in the books spent significant mental energy obsessing over which little brother would kill her, concluding almost certainly that it was Tyrion. The word Valonqar in High Valyrian is gender neutral, meaning it could apply to any younger sibling, including female ones. Fan theories circulated for years about who the Valonqar actually was. The leading candidates were Tyrion Lannister, Jaime Lannister, who is technically younger than Cersei by a matter of minutes, and Arya Stark, who had demonstrated in Season 8 that she could wear other people's faces. The timepiece on the prophecy confirmed that even Lena Headey had engaged with the question, noting that the actress seemed to believe the prophecy contained real foreshadowing about Cersei's end. What actually happened in Season 8 was, as the M2V analysis noted after the finale, technically consistent with the Valonqar prophecy, even without the line having been spoken in the show. Cersei died in the tunnels beneath the Red Keep as the building collapsed from Daenerys' dragon attack. She was with Jaime, who had returned to her despite everything, despite his entire arc pointing away from her and toward something better. He held her. He put his hands around her as she wept. The MTV piece described it precisely. As Cersei and Jaime are trapped in the tunnels underneath the Red Keep, the walls begin to collapse from Daenerys' attack on the city. Cersei starts to weep, and Jaime comforts her with his hands around her neck. The little brother, younger than her by minutes, born immediately after her in the same moment that introduced them both into the world, holding her as she died. The showrunners had removed the line but honored the image. Whether deliberately or coincidentally, the Valonqar fulfilled itself. The reason I think the show's omission of the Valonqar line matters beyond the obvious fan theory angle is what it reveals about how the showrunners understood Cersei's arc. In the books, Cersei's obsession with the Valonqar is a constant presence in her internal monologue. She thinks about it, plots around it, and it drives a significant portion of her hatred of Tyrion. Removing it from the show meant that Cersei's paranoia about Tyrion had to be motivated entirely by the visible facts of their relationship, rather than by the prophetic framework that organized her thinking in the books. The show's Cersei feared Tyrion because she had always feared him, because she resented his intelligence and his father's love, because he had killed Tywin, because he had escaped. The book's Cersei feared him because she believed he was destined to kill her. The difference in motivation produced slightly different characters, but the destination was the same. The ending a prophecy described arrived regardless. Cersei's attempts to avoid the prophecy accelerated it. When George R.R. Martin asked whether Cersei could make the prophecy happen through her efforts to avoid it, he was pointing toward one of the oldest structural patterns in tragedy: the self-fulfilling prophecy. It is a pattern that appears in Oedipus Rex, in Macbeth, in virtually every major tragic tradition across human storytelling. The person who hears the prophecy acts to prevent it. Those actions create the conditions for its fulfillment. The prophecy describes the outcome of the prevention. Cersei is one of the most complete modern literary examples of this pattern, and Game of Thrones constructed her arc with enough attention to it that each specific decision that accelerated the prophecy can be traced directly to the specific fear that motivated it. The younger and more beautiful queen part produced the clearest causal chain. Cersei feared Margaery Tyrell from the moment she arrived in King's Landing. She watched Margaery manage Joffrey more effectively than she had ever managed him. She watched Tommen fall completely under Margaery's influence. She identified Margaery as the specific fulfillment of Maggy's prediction, and moved to neutralize her using the Faith Militant, a weapon she had created by rearming the High Sparrow's movement, specifically to arrest Loras Tyrell, and then Margaery herself. The plan worked in the short term. Margaery was imprisoned. Cersei was briefly satisfied. Then she was herself arrested by the Faith Militant she had created. Then she was subjected to the Walk of Atonement. Then, in Season 6, she detonated wildfire beneath the Great Sept of Baelor, killing Margaery, the High Sparrow, the entire Faith Militant leadership, Kevin Lannister, and hundreds of others. And Tommen, watching from a window as the building exploded, stepped off the ledge. Margaery was dead. Cersei held the throne, and one of the golden shrouds had just been completed by her own hand. The Ringer made the same observation with specific precision. By reacting so strongly to Joffrey's death, by forcing Tyrion to a trial, which leads to Oberyn's death and the Sand Snake's desire for revenge, she indirectly causes Myrcella South, and by conniving against Margaery to try to prevent the younger and more beautiful part of the prophecy from manifesting, she sets in motion the series of events that leads to Tommen's suicide. Two of the three golden shrouds, Myrcella and Tommen, were direct products of Cersei's attempts to protect them. The prophecy was not operating on Cersei from outside. It was operating through her. She was not a victim of the prediction. She was its primary instrument. What Maggy the Frog was, and why the scene was placed at the very beginning. When I went back and researched Maggy the Frog in both the show and the source material, what I found was a character whose background is more specific than the scene makes obvious. In the books, Maggy, whose real name was Maggy the Frog, even in life, a corruption of Maggie, was a woman from Yi Ti, one of the great civilizations east of Essos. She had come to Westeros with her husband, a merchant who dealt in exotic goods. She was known to possess genuine prophetic ability, not the vague, interpretable predictions of most seers, but specific and accurate statements about specific futures. Her prophecy to Cersei is the most documented example of this ability in the Martin canon, and it is notable precisely because it was accurate in the most verifiable way. Every element of it can be checked against subsequent events. The show's Maggie was played by Jodie May, a British actress known for distinguished stage and television work, and the performance she gave in the scene was deliberately underplayed. Young Cersei arrived expecting to be intimidated by something fearsome. The Maggie she found was small, quiet, and precise. She did not perform the witch theatrically. She simply answered the questions. The contrast between Cersei's entitlement and Maggie's stillness was the entire emotional architecture of the scene. A girl who believed she could demand the future to reveal itself on her terms, and a woman who already knew that the terms were not hers to set. Cersei threatened to have Maggie's eyes gouged out when she was reluctant to answer. Maggie proceeded to answer in a way that effectively gouged out Cersei's instead. The decision to open Season 5 with this flashback, to place the prophecy before the episodes that would complete its fulfillment rather than after, was a choice about how to read the season. The show was saying, watch what follows in light of what this girl was told. Watch Cersei's decisions knowing that she has been carrying this prediction since she was 10 years old. Watch her paranoia, not as irrationality, but as the specific psychological product of a prophecy that told her she would hold everything she valued and then lose it all. The Ringer noted that Cersei thinks about the prophecy throughout A Feast for Crows, hiss on your prophecy, old woman, while making decisions that seem from outside the prophecy like overreaction, and seem from inside it like rational prevention. The audience of the show was being invited, by the flashback, into the inside of it, to see the world as Cersei saw it, as a space where the worst thing she had ever been told was always true, and everything she did to stop it was the thing that made it true. The prophecy's final accounting. What was fulfilled and what was changed. When I compiled the final accounting of the Maggy the Frog prophecy against what actually happened in Game of Thrones, the fulfillment rate was almost total, with one critical divergence that revealed something important about the difference between George R.R. Martin's books and the television adaptation's own understanding of its ending. The wedding to the king, fulfilled precisely. Cersei married Robert Baratheon, not Rhaegar Targaryen. The queenship for a time and its end by a younger queen, fulfilled, though the show distributed the fulfillment across two figures: Marjorie's displacement of Cersei in seasons 3 and 4, and Daenerys' conquest of King's Landing in Season 8. The 20 children of the king versus her 3, fulfilled. The 3 golden shrouds, Joffrey, Myrcella, Tommen, fulfilled, each by a distinct mechanism, each traceable in some way to Cersei's own decisions. The Valonqar who wraps hands around her throat, fulfilled in image, if not in name, when Jaime held her as the Red Keep collapsed around them. The one element that the show handled differently from what the prophecy in the books had suggested was the question of whether Cersei would be cast down before her death, or whether her death would itself constitute the casting down. In the books, the casting down is an active process, a rival queen taking what she holds. In the show, Daenerys burned the city rather than strategically taking the throne, and Cersei died under rubble rather than being formally deposed. The casting down and the death merged into a single event. The prophecy structure was preserved, its choreography was simplified. What Maggie had described across 4 predictions in the books became 3 predictions in the show, with the 4th smuggled into the imagery of the ending without being spoken. When I think about what the Maggy the Frog scene was actually doing in the architecture of Game of Thrones, what I find is an unusual thing. A show that was built around the argument that there are no prophecies in the real world, that power is contingent and human and mortal, choosing to tell one specific character's story as a tragedy organized entirely around a prophecy that was accurate. Cersei Lannister was the only major character in Game of Thrones whose story was genuinely prophetic in structure, whose end was stated at her beginning, and who moved through every intervening event in the specific way that people who know their prophecy, fate, and cannot accept it tend to move, with increasing speed, increasing desperation, and increasing willingness to destroy anything that might delay the arrival of what was coming. Maggie told her the future when she was 10 years old. She spent the next 40 years proving the witch right. And the 4 minutes at the opening of Season 5 that showed you this, in a flashback that the show had never used as a device before, and never used again for this character, told you, in the clearest possible structural signal, that everything you had been watching for 4 seasons, and everything you were about to watch, was the playing out of something that had already been written. The flashback was not backstory, it was the verdict. The rest was just evidence.